Thank you so much, everyone, and welcome to this session on managing disruptive behavior in the classroom. My name is Alec Cattell, and I am one of the associate directors here at the Teaching, Learning, and Professional Development Center. I'm joined by other colleagues at the TLPDC, Carrie Pike and Molly Jacobs. Thanks for joining us. And we are also joined by Dr. Matt Gregory from the Dean of Students, Joanna Green from the Office of Student Conduct, and Dr. Allison Whitney, who's an associate professor in the Department of English, as well as the 2021-2022 faculty fellow here at the TLPDC. So thank you all so much for taking the time to talk with us today about this very important topic. We're really concerned today with talking about how we as instructors of record can foster a safe, inclusive learning environment that is conducive to learning. So that's what we're going to look at today.
That'll be me to get us started. So thank you, Alec, for that introduction to get us going. One reality that I think all of us can relate to is that in our graduate preparation programs for what we teach, I would imagine all of us probably did not have a class that taught us about classroom management or how to handle student behavioral issues in class. I know that I didn't. And literally learned some of those things by either working in student conduct or teaching in the class and having to deal with things as they came up. So this presentation was brought out of necessity that and that recognition that probably a lot of us have not had any type of conversation or training or exposure to handling classroom behavioral issues. So that is the purpose of our training today and our time that we're going to be spending together. One thing that I think is important to recognize is behavior that manifests in the classroom may not necessarily constitute a violation of campus policies or student behavioral policies. And Joanna's going to talk a little bit more about the student code of conduct and our behavioral expectations. Sometimes our students that might pose a disruption or might pose a challenge to us as instructors could just have some different behavioral issues. They might have some health issues going on with themselves. They might have some mental health challenges. They might just be a little bit on the odd side. And for the longest time, I would say that being odd is not necessarily a violation of conduct. And one thing that I think you'll pick up as we go through this presentation is we focus very much on the behavior. So all these things that we're going to be talking about could be very frustrating. It could strike up some feelings and emotions for us as the instructors. And when it gets reported to the Student Conduct Office or my office as the Office of the Dean of Students, we will tend to focus on what the behavior is. So I want to orient us up front of that lens of paying attention to what the presenting behavior is and recognize our feelings and our frustrations, but really being able to ground ourselves in what the questionable behavior is, because that's going to help us ultimately to plan a path to be able to address that behavior and go forward and continue that class, whether it's halfway through the semester or all the way through the semester. So that's a little bit of what we're going to pay attention to today. It's all about the environment, all about the student behavior that we're going to be discussing and figuring out how we can constructively address it. So a little bit to give you an idea of what we're going to be covering today, behavior, philosophy, and policy in the classroom, how to report a concern, some tips for classroom management, and then we're going to give some examples for us to kind of unpack as a group and talk through. And then lastly, going through and reporting that and what the various reporting mechanisms are here at Tech, whether it's by phone or in person or Raiders report or online or however that might look, that we're going to give you the actual how-to. So that's going to be framing our day-to-day. To get us started, and again, kind of focusing in on that behavior, like I said, this is a definition that's not in our current policy. I will share that here in a little bit, but this is a definition by a gentleman named Gary Pavella. Dr. Pavella is a renowned expert on academic integrity and civility surrounding the academic environment. And he says classroom disruption is a behavior a reasonable person would view as being likely to substantially or repeatedly interfere with the conduct of a class. Now, there's one very important phrase in this definition that I want to talk a little bit about, and that's a reasonable person. So all of us might say, well, I'm pretty reasonable. I consider myself to be a reasonable person. What he's talking about there, and the old rule or metric that I've always heard, is if you go into the local driver's license facility where we would go to get our license plates or our driver's license to be able to drive a car, the people that are in there, we can presume that they are old enough to be classified as adults, so over the age of 18. They are there to conduct some business with the state for the purpose of being able to drive or register a motor vehicle. These are the same people who are oftentimes tapped to serve as jurors in courts of law, whether it's civil court or criminal court. So these are the people that are our peers and would constitute a reasonable person's perspective. So they may not even be experts in whatever the concern might be, but they have impressions, perceptions, understandings of described behavior. They can formulate a conclusion, in other words. So in my old conduct role and what Joanna does now, if I walked into the DMV and I gave them a case file and 4 or 5 people there in line waiting to get their driver's license, I said, hey, read this. What do you think? That would be a reasonable person standard. So it is literally what our peers over the age of 18 who have some life experience looking at the same fact patterns, same information we would, what would they determine? Would they determine this is a policy violation? Would they determine this is concerning? Would they determine that this is a threat? What they think if they were looking at the same information we were? That's the reasonable person standard. So Gary also says substantially or repeatedly interfere with the conduct of a class. So let's go from that to our definition. Our Code of Student Conduct describes disruption as disruptive and or obstructive conduct, intentional or reckless behavior that disrupts or obstructs the university operations, which could include teaching class, including the cessation or temporary cessation of teaching, research, administration, or other university activities, and or other authorized non-university activities which occur on campus. So just to give you an example, your ability to teach class, if a student is so disruptive that you have to temporarily or for the purpose of the rest of that class session, stop teaching because of that disruption, that is a disruption of your classroom activities. Likewise, if a student organization has a speaker come on campus to talk about something political, and students who are there in protest actively disrupt to the point where the speaker is unable to continue his talk or her talk, that would be a temporary or full cessation of that event and program and not protected speech or a protective form of freedom of expression. So we could discipline on that. So those are the types of behaviors that we're looking for, is something that is substantial, repeated, and interferes, causing a full or temporary cessation of the university activity in question. That's the level that we're looking at. If it's not at that level, and we could continue teaching by giving a corrective comment or a feedback, that's not classroom disruption. It's annoying, it's frustrating, it definitely deserves to be addressed, either in private or maybe in the class if you have to, but it may not constitute disruption unless it has that temporary or full cessation of activity. So next slide talks a little bit about some awareness of our students that might serve us well when we're talking about this particular topic. It's important for all of us as instructors to recognize that our students come from a wealth of differences and backgrounds, to include international students, different cultural backgrounds, even students have different cultural backgrounds who might call the United States their home country. Students with disabilities, students with mental health conditions that many times we may not even know about. For many of those students, they probably take some kind of medication and follow a treatment plan. And as long as they are following that treatment plan, can function at high levels just like any of us can. Occasionally, we might have a student who is not taking their medication and might pose a challenge for themselves about being able to follow that treatment plan that's set out for them. We have students who are non-traditional, students who might be older in age, older in life experience, some students who may have former military who are now coming to school. They may have outside educational and professional experiences. They may own a business or work full-time outside of classes in the workforce here in Lubbock. They may be younger students. They may have graduated early. We are seeing more and more high schools offer AP credit to where it is feasible. I have a student in my class that I'm teaching this semester that shared. She is technically a junior as an 18-year-old and first-year student in college university because of all her AP classes that she's taken in high school. So the reality is we could have very young, chronologically young students as well. They are juggling multiple responsibilities, may have obligations for their family, may have sick siblings or parents or grandparents that they're trying to take care of, may have work responsibilities back home. They may work on a farm or some other type of job that they have to go home on weekends to be able to work and help the family economically. And of course, they have their studies, but they may also have full-time student work positions on campus or jobs outside of the university. Naturally, there's extracurricular activities that our students could be involved with as well. So all these responsibilities, and to add on to that, COVID, right, that all of us are dealing with and still dealing with, that may have affected our own mental health and wellness, just from having multiple months now of trying to work in a pandemic situation. They may have trouble with addiction, whether it's alcohol or other substances. They might even have a criminal history. That's a little bit of a misnomer that if someone has a criminal history or a conviction that they can't come to school, they actually can. They still have to apply like everyone else, and we do ask them to disclose it. And there is a committee that admissions has that reviews those applications, mainly to deem that that person is not a threat to anybody. But we also have students who may register as a sex offender, and that sex offender designation may have happened 20 years ago, and they've just decided to come back to school and have had no more issues whatsoever legally since. And after that admissions review, they may be allowed to enter in as a school or as a student at Texas Tech. So there's a variety of students that we work with and help. And with that, I think Joanna's going to get us into what rights our students have.
Yes, so we'll start with some of the rights of the students, and then we'll jump into some rights of our instructors. So do know that we believe in equity, and we want to make sure that we are helping all parties involved here at the campus. So students deserve to be treated respectfully. And so Matt mentioned feelings and emotions, and I think emotions can run high on either side, whether you're a student who are dealing with all of those things that Matt talked about earlier, or your instructor who you feel that classroom management may not be something you feel like you should have to do. You may feel I should have to come into class, I can give my material and move forward. And sometimes students just don't grasp that. Students deserve to be graded fairly. And so once you get feelings and emotions involved, sometimes that can, become unbalanced. And so sometimes you have to step back. You may have to meet with the student after class, have some conversation and work through that. But you never want to find yourself in a position where you're grading a student unfairly. Students have a right to question concepts and engage in debate. Now, not in a disrespectful manner, disruptive manner. During the middle of class, we're taking up a 30-minute session to talk about the fact that you don't agree with the concept I'm presenting. That's why your instructor has office hours. So that's how we'll talk to you all later about how you can work through those conversations and be able to move that forward. Students have a right to have a learning environment free from harassment, harm, and threats of violence. And this isn't necessarily from an instructor. I think about the Zoom environment. And so when the chat feature, for instance, is allowed to be activated in classrooms, when you have students messaging back and forth, sometimes it can be some questionable or concerning comments made, or if people are asking questions, some students may get upset because one student feels this person should know this. And so you as the instructor have to monitor that and make sure that you're stepping in, intervening as appropriate, and making sure that all of your students feel okay and comfortable in that environment. And students have the right to attend class. We'll get into some examples later about removal from class when it may be appropriate and so forth, but students aren't allowed to just be removed from the class for the semester because you were upset with something they said You didn't like the fact that they told you they didn't like the concept you were presenting or the manner. So students do have a right to attend class. Students may not disrupt the educational environment and stop other students from learning. That is not what they are allowed to do. That's not their role. Again, they need to schedule office hours if they have some concerns. They are not allowed to stop you from being able to teach. You're giving your information, you're presenting what you need to for that day. If students have concerns, there are processes in place and they should follow those steps. But it should never disrupt the academic environment where you cannot deliver your material. Students may not engage in or threaten harm towards others. So going back to that Zoom example, whether it's Zoom or in person, I did have an incident recently. The instructor did a great job with reporting the concerns. Apparently the instructor had left the room for a moment during a break. One student was coughing. Another student did not feel comfortable with that, told the student that they should leave because they're coughing, and things got a little out of hand. And so while no direct threats were given, there still was some concerning behavior. And so we called the students in, did our process, followed through, but we wanted to make sure ultimately that all parties involved felt comfortable going back into that space. So students may not fail to comply with reasonable or warranted directions. And so that is a potential violation of university policy. If you're asking a student to do something reasonable that you would ask any other student, and they are failing to comply, possibly causing a disruption or causing a delay of some sort. Students may not violate standards of the university. The student code that Matt mentioned earlier, it's online. We'll talk about that resource. You can always control F. It's pretty lengthy. The handbook is a pretty lengthy document, but it is a great resource. So instructors have rights as well. So you have the right, as I've said, to teach and deliver your material in your class. And you have the right to be treated respectfully as well. And so we talk about the word respectfully, and it can mean different things to different people. And so we have conversations, and there are times that whether it's me, Matt, or someone else from maybe the dean of students office or my staff will sit with instructors and our students to try to work through some of the concerns that are reported to determine where communication may have gone wrong. Instructors have the right to set and enforce their academic and behavioral expectations. And so when you're giving this information up front, because how you set the stage is how things continue. And so communication is going to be key throughout the entire semester. Instructors have the right to set and uphold and modify your policies, but just make sure you're communicating those changes. Try not to do things very last minute where students may not have an opportunity to know that something has changed, but if it happens, just communicate it. Instructors have the right to be in a workplace free from harassment, harm, and threats of violence. No student should ever threaten an instructor, another student, or anyone. You should be able to come to work, do what you need to do, and be comfortable. And always know you can ask for help. And we'll talk about some of that later today. So instructors are expected to clearly communicate expectations. A lot of times I think communication breakdowns happen when it's either something was emailed, maybe it's gone to a junk folder, a student could have missed it. And I think I've seen the opposite when an instructor missed something from a student. And I really appreciate when instructors acknowledge that as well. It's just given the same grace, if you will, that you would want extended to you. And I talk to students just the same. How would you feel if this is the way the instructor communicated with you? You would not feel it's appropriate. So why did you feel that was appropriate? So we do hold students accountable. Instructors are expected to address inappropriate behavior, especially in your classroom. We want to empower you. We want you to know that this is the space you're in for this entire semester. You want to be comfortable in that space. You want to respectfully own that room and make sure everyone is aware that they can come to you. You have control. You're able to handle disagreements and situations. We want to be there for you, but we want you to be that first line to say, I can take care of this. Instructors are expected to hold students accountable for their actions. Students will do things, and some instructors will say, okay, well, I won't address it now. They do it again, we let it go again. So then we get to the 5th time someone has done something, it's never been reported. But then when it gets to our office, whether it's my office or Matt's office, it's saying this student has acted out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And we're like, we've never heard this. I haven't received the report. Oh, I never reported it. Okay, well, did you address the concerns with the student? Well, no. Okay, do you know if the student was aware that there was a potential concern? Well, they should have. And they probably should have, but we can do a better job to also make sure students know when we do have concerns about their behavior in hopes of preventing it from happening again. If we stop it up front, there's a strong probability that they will not keep repeating the same behavior. Instructors are expected to report academic and non-academic misconduct. We're going to talk about the reporting forms through student conduct or raters report. Either way, if it gets to Matt, it'll get to me if it needs to. And the same with me, if it's a student of concern report, I'll get it to the Dean of Students office. We talk very often and make sure that we're doing the best things we can for all parties. And instructors are expected to consult as needed to address challenging behavior. Myself, I sit in on meetings with instructors at times. I'll be doing another meeting like that with the student next week. I know Dean Gregory does the same thing. And we just want to make sure that everyone is comfortable. We can help coach you through a conversation, or if you'd like for us to be there, we really try to help however we can. So policy on student behavior. So this is just a very short snippet. As I've shared, the student handbook and code is pretty lengthy, but section B speaks to our academic misconduct policies. And so we'll talk about their resource and where to find our student handbook. Some of you all may have reported before, and some of you may not. Anytime you're preparing to report a student to our office, feel free to reach out to us and we can help walk you through that. It's not a problem at all. One thing to note when it relates to academic misconduct, students should be going through the student conduct process. This is to help ensure that their due process rights are followed throughout the entire process, but also so we can support you as an instructor if there is ever an official complaint or if it goes further. Students do get upset and get emotional, file different types of appeals and complaints, and we want to make sure we can support you and say that we've consistently followed our processes and procedures that the institution has in place. So for instance, one of the examples or the notes here on the slide, students should not receive what we call an academic penalty without going through the student conduct process and being found responsible for an academic violation. So for instance, if a student potentially cheated on an exam, and we'll talk about some more examples later, but if they're reported to the Office of Student Conduct and they're found responsible, you will have already told us the student will receive partial credit for that exam if they're found responsible. That's when that academic penalty can go into place. There are very rare times where a student and a professor has met and they've decided that they have come to an agreement. Sometimes instructors will try to help students and say, okay, I will not report this. However, you can get credit for X, Y, and Z. The student will agree to that. And so usually that is something done in writing. And again, contacting our office for a conversation for assistance with that, I would strongly encourage, because we do have students that turn around and say that they were forced or coerced into making that decision. So we really try to help faculty and instructors out with that. So section B part 2 talks about actions, what we call actions against members of the university community and others. And so this is basically everything that's not academic related. So there is so much more, but this is where you find your disorderly conduct information, disruptive behavior, failure to comply, and other things of that nature. So classroom management tips. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Whitney.
Hi, everyone. So as you've probably gleaned so far, a big theme in our presentation today is the importance of clarity and communication. It's crucial that as instructors, we are clear with our students and consistently, perhaps repeatedly, communicate what our expectations are. And that goes for academic performance issues, but also modes of behavior in the classroom. what students' roles are, the kind of etiquette we have in our meeting spaces, whether they're virtual or face-to-face. One thing to bear in mind is a lot of things about, being polite, being considerate, things like that. You might think, well, that's common sense. But it's important to bear in mind that not all classes run the same way. If, for example, if a student's college experience up until now has been primarily 300-person lecture classes, forms of behavior that might not be disruptive in those spaces could become a problem in a small seminar, for example. So it's important to be mindful that students may come into the classroom with behaviors that they don't realize are disruptive. And a good way to get around that is to, again, be very explicit about what your expectations are. One of the points on our slide here talks about creating a positive rapport with students in the first 2 weeks. Now, of course, you should maintain a good rapport throughout the semester, but that 2-week period is important for a few reasons. One, bear in mind that during the add drop period, students may be coming into your class, leaving your class, coming and going. And if you have one presentation on how to behave in the classroom and a student misses it, it's important to just be mindful of that and ensure that new students coming into the space have an understanding of what those expectations are. On the point about addressing behaviors immediately and consistently, as Joanna said, of course, you want to nip problems in the bud. You don't want a situation where a behavior has happened multiple times, right, before you take action. And so taking immediate action and consistent action, it's part of that clarity and communication idea, but it's also important in terms of fairness. So if one student is continually disrupting the flow of class discussion, for example, and not being held to account for it, but then you immediately deal with another student, that creates an unfair situation and can really compromise the relationship of trust in the classroom. So it's important to think about these policies in terms of the matters of equity, right, and fairness in your classroom. When it comes to a situation where you need to confront a student about behavior, it's a good idea to have those conversations in private, if you can. And one of the reasons for that is that there may be a reasoning behind their behavior that you're not aware of. And that can give you an opportunity to better understand where they're coming from and either perhaps direct them to resources they might need, or at the very least explain what it is about the behavior that is causing a problem. Now, dealing with confrontations, disruptive behaviors, it can be upsetting, right? It can be distressing for you, but it's important to maintain your cool, right? Try to maintain a calm demeanor, and try to address the behavior, not the person, right? So it's not that you as an individual are a disruption to the class, it's that these behaviors are creating an issue and getting in the way of the learning process. And maintaining that kind of rhetorical control, right, in terms of how you address the problem, can not only help make things clear to your students, but can prevent further difficulties down the road. So this idea of owning the concern. Now, I realize some of these points, it will vary depending on whether you're addressing a whole class or if you're in a one-on-one conversation with a student. But when it comes to disruptions, it's important to clarify to the student what the consequences of their disruptive behaviors are. So, for example, if a student is talking out of turn in class, right, interrupting people, things like that, Don't assume that the disruption is necessarily intentional, and rather make clear to them, right, what the impact of their behavior is. And again, try to keep the attention on the problems with the behavior rather than it being a matter of, say, the individual student's character, right? And keep in mind that even if your intentions are not to do that, it's quite easy for somebody in a confrontation, right, to take things personally. So, having conversations where you figure out, right, where the student is coming from, right, where the disruption is coming from, can allow you to understand what's happening and best deal with it. This final point about keeping records is very important. If you have concerns about any student, right, if a behavior seems problematic, if they come to you with a concern, it's important to keep records of all of those interactions. So that could include, things that happened in class, digital or face-to-face verbal communications that you may have with that student. This is important in the event that you need to file official reports and things like that. It's crucial to have those records, but it can also be useful in conversations with students, because you can say, well, let me remind you, right, that this happened on this day, and you'll recall that you said this on this other day, right? And that can be very useful, both for kind of grounding the conversation in the facts of what happened, and making sure that there's clarity about chain of events, that sort of thing. Now, of course, many of us are teaching online or teaching in hybrid classes or using various online tools in our teaching. And just as with the face-to-face class, you want to set very clear policies and model appropriate behavior for how we communicate online. This applies to synchronous meetings, chat forums, email, and really any other kind of digital tool that students are using to communicate with one another and with their instructors. A lot of the norms of online behavior, right, are not compatible with a good classroom environment. And so it's important to talk to students about how, some of the things they might be accustomed to in digital communication might not be appropriate for a classroom. And think again, behaviors that we might take for granted as appropriate face-to-face, it can be challenging to translate those into a digital context. So you want to model appropriate behavior on that front. When it comes to synchronous meetings, say using Zoom or similar platforms, and if students are attending class from home, it's important to be mindful of their privacy. And also, when you're considering things like requirements for how students are to participate, keep in mind that, for example, a student might be in a space where they might not feel comfortable verbally participating in class discussion on a certain topic because of the people who might be in the space where they are listening to them. Similarly, there may be privacy issues, even safety issues when it comes to like having a camera on that shows the background, that shows your location. So there's a number of issues that don't really come up in a face-to-face classroom that can be at issue in a digital context. And so I encourage you to have a level of flexibility in terms of what constitutes participation, and understanding that for combination of technological reasons, personal reasons, housing reasons, what have you, there may be limits on how students can engage in a classroom. At the same time, it's perfectly appropriate for you to require that students engage and have open discussions with them about how those different modes of communication are working and how they can contribute to a good learning environment. So when it comes to conflict resolution, whether you're dealing with a one-on-one conversation with a student or a situation with a larger group in the classroom. Be mindful that you can be the one who sets the tone, right, for how that communication will happen. And so it's very important to, even if it's a heated discussion, to remain calm, cool and collected, and be mindful of things like how you're using your voice, the physical relationships among people in the room. We will talk about matters of safety soon, which should always be a primary concern. And this last point on focusing on the point of what is being communicated. In a classroom, one can always bring things back to the particular learning goals of the class. So if someone's behavior is, if someone uses an ad hominem attack against a classmate, right? That's inappropriate behavior in any circumstance, but we can make the point that not only is that something that you shouldn't do to other people, right? And one should apologize, but it also gets in the way of the learning goal of the class, right? It's moving us away from the purpose of really the university in general. And if we think back to earlier in the presentation, the kinds of the purpose of the institution, right, and the kinds of conversations that we're supposed to be having, you can always bring us back to those kinds of themes about the purpose of education. What is this class about when it comes to resolving conflict?
And I'm muted. Thank you, Allison. So one thing I'll add about that last point that Allison was talking about on focus on the point of what is being communicated. And this is really, really hard to do. But even when someone is elevated or angry or upset, they're communicating helpful information that might be helpful for you to know, that might be able to help you address whatever concern they have or reach a resolution with that student or know where best to refer them at the university to get additional resources or support. So, but it's hard for us because we feel like we're getting yelled at, and it's hard for us to listen when we're getting yelled at. No one likes that situation. But if we're able to focus in on what is being communicated, even if it's in a heightened, elevated way, there's helpful bits of information that are oftentimes communicated, even when someone's upset, that could be helpful to us to assist them or to de-escalate. So that's another part of that point that I like to bring up. So the next couple slides are about safety. And I would imagine for all of us, this is the scenario that we likely fear the most, where something is actively occurring in our classroom and we believe either our and/or our students' safety is possibly in jeopardy. And what can we do in that time to be able to try to get help for yourself or the students in your class? And oftentimes that's where a diversion might be helpful, which we're going to talk about in the next slide. But if you do not have the Texas Tech University Police non-emergency number programmed in your phone, I recommend doing that. Just enter in TTPD and that 742-3931 number. Now, of course, if it is an active emergency where you believe you yourself, and kind of going back to that reasonable person, you yourself or one of your students is in harm's way and could actively be harmed or injured, that's not calling non-emergency, that's calling the 911 number to get Texas Tech Police responding as quickly as they possibly can to the classroom. Response times on average for our Texas Tech Police on campus are between 3 and 5 minutes. They tend to be a little closer to the 3 minutes, which is comforting. So you may have to kind of manage the situation to the best of your ability for just a few minutes before Texas Tech Police can be on site. Some things to be aware of for you and for your students if there's an active emergency situation in your classroom is when you're first getting acquainted to a new classroom space, knowing the room, know where the doors are, where your exits are, even take a look at, I know there's some classrooms that the exit might actually lead to kind of a back corridor of the classroom that may not actually be the best exit, and that the exits at the top of the classroom might be the better ones. So kind of take some time early in the semester to scope out your room, see how the seating is arranged. Is it fixed seating? Is it movable seating? Where is the instructor's podium? Where are given exits? Is there a clock in the room? Is there access to a phone? Is there a phone on the wall? All those things can be helpful to know in the event of emergency, that you have taken the time to look for those things before. Being aware of things in your room that you could use as a barrier, and for your students too. If there is someone who is aggressing toward you, can you use the instructor's podium as a barrier between you and that person to provide a space of safety between you and that person long enough to be able to allow for police to show up? And I don't share all this to make you paranoid or make you worried. It's just good tips. So if there's an emergency in the classroom, that you have some advantage to you in the classroom to be able to help yourself and your students. Do not let the aggressor get between you and the exit. So if the quickest point is between you and that exit, and that person is staying in between you, and you have to go through them to get to the exit, that's a scenario that none of us want to have to face. Now, if there's multiple exits in the classroom, that perhaps helps you. There's also, ability to try to de-escalate, make the person think that you're in agreement with them, recognize the concern that they're saying, to try to garner compliance from them, really as a strategy to be able to open up the opportunity for you to get to the exit. That's not, you don't have to actually agree with them, but you can kind of be perceived that you are, really just to help de-escalate and get that person to kind of back off a little bit to allow for you to be able to get out, or students to get out. Lead by example. You as best as you can try to remain, as Allison said, cool, calm, and collected. One reality that we all know is this: in this digital age, every student has a camera phone. And so that's another reason why we as the instructors always want to be the professional, try to lead by example, even in a crisis situation, as much as possible, because I guarantee you someone will pull out their phone and do one of two things: film the student who is being aggressive or who is causing the emergency, or film us and our response and how we handle it. So I think it's a good rule of thumb that we are always mindful that there's a conflict in class, emergency in class, a crisis in class, a disruptive student, a rude, obnoxious student. Someone may pull out that camera phone and be filming the whole exchange. I would rather be an example for how to handle a classroom situation in a professional and collected manner than be the subject of concern based on how I handled the situation. And then always, always, always remember this last point: never physically touch a student. That it could be constituted as an assault if we touch a student. If you're like me, I'm kind of touchy-feely. I hug. I try to show affection and care by hugging. In a situation of a student in a classroom, I will not touch one of my students. I just want to err on the side of being the consummate professional, and that there's no question that I was above board throughout my entire interaction with that student. Nor will I lay a hand on them, like to try to pull them out of the classroom by grabbing their arm. They could also claim that that would be assault. So I'm going to try to use my voice and encourage them to leave, or direct them to leave as much as possible without touching them. And I've already alluded to the need from time to time to be able to create a diversion, to either allow us an opportunity to call police, or a student that you may designate or predetermine that might assist you in an emergency situation, that they would step out and call police, or just to be able to create space, create distance, create time to allow for Texas Tech to respond, Texas Tech Police, or for you to be able to get out of the classroom. So here are 4 examples that we've come up with for the purpose of this presentation that might serve you well as a diversionary tactic. So if you have departmental staff or colleagues in your department that you can create a code word with, and everyone in the department, including the department staff, knows of this code word, that if I say, hey, I need to reach out to the department real quick, I seem to be missing something, you can call your departmental office or a colleague and say, whatever that code word might be. So in this case, let's say blue pickle. Now you might actually say green pickle, because anyone who says blue pickle will say, well, there's not really such thing as a blue pickle. Although I would say, if you've not tried pickles in Kool-Aid, phenomenal. If you let that marinate for a while in Kool-Aid, I know, Suzanne, it sounds disgusting, but it actually be quite good, depending upon the Kool-Aid. So let's say green pickle is the code word. Like, I really need my snack. I'm not feeling well. I need something to eat. And, can you find that green pickle for me? And that is actually a code word for them to contact Texas Tech Police for you. You'll probably want to come up with a better code phrase or word than green pickle, but as an example, say you have to take an important call. There's something that just occurred to me that I really need to address right now. I'm going to just step outside of the classroom. I will be in the hallway just outside the classroom, but give me one moment to make this call. I'm so sorry, but I need to make this call. Step out and contact Texas Tech Police. Stay still in the vicinity where you can see the inside of the classroom, especially if you're concerned about some form of aggression. You want to still be able to protect your students as much as possible while you make that call. Say you're not feeling well. If we're getting yelled at, or if a student's aggressing in our class or challenging our authority, I'm imagining you're not feeling well in that situation. So say that you're not feeling well and you need a bit of a pause to be able to collect your thoughts, and that you're just going to step out for just a moment, and you're going to be right outside the doorway and call the police if you need to, or call a departmental chair or colleague who can assist you with whatever is presenting inside the classroom. Maybe at that time you need the diversion and you want to assign something that's not really scheduled for the day, but say, while we're on this subject of XYZ, I want you all to take a moment. I presume most of you have an iPad, a phone, or someone close to you might, or even a laptop that you have available to you. Let's go ahead and get those items out, even if you're using your phone. And I want you to do some internet research for me on this topic. And we're going to discuss it here in a little bit once we've given you all time to research. Assign them some type of busy work task that allows you then to make a phone call or get some help or assistance to be able to help on whatever is happening in that class. So those are some examples. By all means, not all inclusive. There could be some other diversions that you've come up with that are not readily apparent that we're creating a diversion for the purpose of contacting help. But you could use to your advantage to be able to summon help, or to give yourself some time to be able to de-escalate or take the class in a different direction. And Allison, I think we're at our time where we're going to talk about some examples that we have identified.
Yeah, so and for this part, I absolutely encourage anyone to offer examples or potential ways that they've dealt with questions like this, or nuances around them that they'd like to bring up. So I encourage you to use the raise hand reaction, which should be on your Zoom menu down at the bottom. So these are just a few examples of types of disruption that one might experience in the classroom. So in the case of students talking while you're talking, and then making it hard for other students to stay focused on the material you're presenting. A potential response to that would be to simply point out that, hey folks, like kind of appeal to the community values, right? Say, hey, if you're talking, I can't hear what other students are saying. These students can't hear what I'm saying. Personally, I teach in a classroom that is designed for film studies. So it's great for watching movies and is not great for discussions. And so if somebody in one corner is talking, then you can't hear what's going on. And so I will point that out to students. And usually that takes care of it. And so again, it's not a matter of, hey, you're disrupting class, but pointing out the larger impact of that behavior. Do other folks want to weigh in on that, or?
Sure, on the first one?
Yeah.
One thing that I have found helpful is the notion of proximity control. That while students are maybe talking or exhibiting undesirable side comments or or side conversations that I might walk near them if the room allows. And oftentimes their awareness of my presence, getting closer to them, will help to cease whatever side conversation's going. So I found usefulness in that.
So
We have a hand.
oh yeah,
Francesca, go ahead.
Francesca, please.
I actually have a similar strategy. If it's a large, I mean, if it's, right after a break, I just make a joke. It's like, okay, let's all calm down. But if it's something that's, lasting for a little bit, and I simply shut up, just enjoy the silence until at some point it dawns on the students that the whole room is quiet, that students are turning around and see who's talking. And I usually have to do that only once a semester. That's it. Like, then I say, thank you, and we proceed. That usually works.
Yeah, thank you, Francesca. We have a few comments in the chat on a similar line, right? Of just stop talking, or look at the student, just wait for them to be done with it, whatever they're done with. And I also appreciate Suzanne's point about calling on students who are talking. I mean, one thing you can do is invite them to participate, right? Now, sometimes they actually have an interesting idea, right, that benefits discussion. Maybe not, but either way, it makes it clear that talking is great in this class if it is part of the actual class discussion.
Allison, I'll chime in too. We also want to be careful of shaming that, if they are not on topic. If we can discern that they're talking about something in course, that might be very helpful. Say, I hear some of you are talking about this more. If you're willing to share, just raise your hand up. We would, if you're willing to share to the rest of the class, it might be helpful for all of us to know what's being said. Now, if in the event that you highly suspect or know that they're not, saying, would you two like to share what you're talking about the rest of class? Could be an act of shaming and could actually hinder your class being able to go forward or shut those students down to the point where they may not be willing to participate or engage after. So we have to be careful about that too.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I think that definitely the kind of, do you have something to share with the class take that's not great. But certainly directing a question about the class material can be a way of bringing them in, right? Or, at least reminding them like, hey, let's stay on topic here. Moving to the next point, a student is upset about their grade on a paper and says you were being too picky when grading. They continue to ask you questions about this. What do you do? Well, before this happens, right, an important practice is to be very clear about assignment expectations, as appropriate, provide rubrics, guidelines, things like that, right, about what is required of students. If the student has specific concerns about an assignment, this is a good use of office hour time, right, to go through an assignment and address what their concerns might be, explain the rationale. Now, if they continue, right, even after you've explained things, you've gone through with them and so forth, one thing I've done is kind of redirect our focus to the next assignment. Say, okay, well, let's start talking about preparing for the next thing you're going to do in this class, so that if you have concerns about your grade or what have you, here are the practices that will get you on the path to doing well on the other parts of the course. And one thing I have sometimes encountered is that students who understandably may have anxieties about their performance, sometimes they will fixate on an assignment, even one that's very small, right? Like a very small quiz that is worth, at the end of the day, hardly any part of their grade, but they get very worried because they didn't do as well as they had hoped. And so perhaps talking about the space of the role of a given assignment in the larger course can help them, remind them of the actual teaching role of that assignment and give them some perspective on it.
And sometimes students just want to be heard, that if they feel like you have taken the time to hear them out and listen, and even maybe saying, I will take another look at this, but after I do, I may or may not change anything, and but I will take another look at this for you. That could be enough, even if your answer doesn't change, and that the question was graded fairly or the assignment was graded fairly. Just taking that time to convey, what I hear what you're saying, let me take another look at it. And then if you come back and you say, I did have a chance to take a look, your grade stands, and I did follow my rubric that I had set forward of how to grade it, then issue over, but at least you gave them the presence that you were willing to look at it.
And I appreciate Suzanne's point in the chat is that having something on the syllabus that explains, like, if you want to talk about a grade on an assignment, here's how you go about that. And I know of some instructors who've had a policy where they'll say, I'm happy to talk with you about your assignment after 24 hours have gone by. And because chances are, right, if they didn't do so well, you have made comments on that assignment, right, explaining the situation. And sometimes a student, like, they look at the grade and then they come to you immediately. And so, give them some time to look at the responses you've already given to their work. And then at least they have that in mind, right, as they come to talk to you. Suzanne, please go ahead.
Yeah, one addition to your explanation, Allison, is that I've also seen instructors say, wait 24 hours, but it must be, we need to have this conversation within 7 days, so that it's not postponed to the end of the semester, so that there's a really clear parameter in there. I've also seen some people say, this needs to be done in writing first. Tell me your concerns about your grade and explain why, and then we'll set up a meeting to talk about it. Kind of, not that you want to make a process that's so cumbersome that students don't feel welcome, but we also want a thoughtful process. So I think that's reasonable.
Absolutely. And again, having a thoughtful process means that when you have a conversation with the student, it will be a lot more productive, as opposed to a kind of knee-jerk reaction, right, to seeing a grade that's lower than they'd hoped.
I might just jump in here. I noticed that we're 1 minute away from 2 o'clock, which is fine. I think we're good to go over, if that's okay with, if the others agree. We can go over for another 10-15 minutes, but if someone in the session needs to go, we completely understand, but feel free to hang out. I think we should just keep going.
One possibility is, do we want to talk a little bit about procedures for, like, actually reporting things, just if people do have to go? And then I'm happy to spend more time with Q&A and talking about examples.
Sure.
For those who wish to spend a little more time. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
So I'll jump in right here. So do know that you're not alone in this process. We are here to help support you the best way that we can. We want to make sure that you feel that you can maintain the integrity of your classroom, but also know that there are some things you may not understand, or you may not have dealt with certain issues, and so you would like support. So you can reach out. If you're not the instructor of record, you can reach out to that instructor of record. You can talk to the supervising faculty. You can go to your department chair. A lot of times they've dealt with a lot of these issues and have great tips. Assistant or associate deans of the college can be great resources, because again, a lot of problems will escalate because people go from 0 to 100. And so sometimes they've missed that in between. Reach out to the Office of Dean of Students or to our office at any time, even if it's just to run something by us to get our thoughts. We are always here to help try to figure it out. We'll talk through it with you. Keep going. So how to report concerns. So how to report student misconduct. So if you visit studentconduct.ttu.edu and you slide down, you'll see different, I'll call them buttons, you'll see something that says general conduct, student organization misconduct, academic integrity. If you happen to fill out the wrong form, it's not the end of the world. We will get it on the correct form and get the information that we need from you. We just want you to report that behavior so that we can address it, so that you're not in a situation that you feel that you don't know what to do next. We also will talk through it with you. If we have questions, we'll follow up. Oftentimes with academic misconduct reports, we do have to do some follow-up because we may be missing information or need to clarify something. Another thing to note, stick to the facts when you're reporting. Students do have the right to see the reports. And so when you're sending in your thoughts and you have your personal feelings in there that says, you know, I feel like the student has problems at home, this is why they're doing this, that has nothing to do with the alleged cheating. Let's stick to the facts. And then if you want to have a phone conversation to express why you're not going to fail the student for that exam, and this is why, we can have that conversation, we can convey that with the student. But I would hate for your words to be taken out of context because that's what you've put into your report. We also have student of concern issues at times, or students in crisis. So Matt talked at the beginning of the presentation. Some of our students are going through a lot of things, and the pandemic has not helped at all. And so I think faculty is going through a lot, staff is going through a lot, everyone's emotions are running high at times, and sometimes we're just all done. So if you notice that a student behavior has changed, the way that they participate in class has changed, maybe students have stopped coming, maybe they're not submitting the same caliber of work, you met with the student and they disclose to you, I don't know what to do, I'm just depressed, or I don't know what to do, I have no way to get to and from school. I have no money. Feel free to report that to the Dean of Students office so that someone from this area can reach out and help support the students. Ultimately, it's a lot of resources here at the university, and so we usually can find somebody to connect with the students. If you yourself feel that you're going through something, don't forget you have resources, whether it's EAP or otherwise, because again, it's a lot. You're dealing with your work life, but you also have a personal life. So we know it's a lot of balance there. And don't forget, Matt said consultations are free if you reach out to the Dean of Students office. They're free with my office too. So I wanted to get us to this contact information page. So feel free to get our information. And again, if you get one of us, you'll get any of us. We can all get you connected to whoever you need to be, to wherever you need to be. But we wanted to make sure that we did leave some time to either go back to those examples and or for for Q&A. And so we want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to be able to talk through some of the things that you've either experienced or some concerns that you think you may have coming up. And I know we're short on time, but please do not hesitate to reach out or start, raise your hand now, because we want to make sure that you can really benefit from today's session.
Luana, there's a question from Francesca in the chat about the kind of help that's available to students.
If I can sort of complete the question, I'm a little worried about sort of, you know, putting a mark on a student, so to speak. I have a student who's expressed a lot of issues that are going on in her life, and I'm thinking she can use some help, but I would like to know what kind of resources can be available to her, rather than, you know, contacting the Dean of Students, and then she might say, gee, you know, I confided in her and then she put the school on my back. So could I know a little bit more about what kind of resources you can make available to students? And then I can tell the student, look, why don't you yourself, you know, or with your permission, I can contact the Dean of Students and you can get this help or this help or this help.
Absolutely. Francesca, I think what you just suggested is the way to go about it. And the reality is the student knows you better than they know me, right? So they're going to be more willing, because they already have shared a little bit with you, they're going to be more willing to talk with you further than they will be me. They're going to be more receptive to maybe suggestions that you might have compared to what I might say. So you serve as the opportunity to be able to create that kind of transition to my office, who we can then utilize our resources and support network to help them maybe with whatever presenting challenges there are. And I'm not saying I would get into a lot of detail with the student about what the concern is, but enough to know how best to refer them and what might be. In actuality, a student may be very comfortable in wanting to talk with you, and you might say, have you ever thought about going to student counseling center and talking to one of the counselors over there? And the student might be very willing to go right then and there and walk with you over to the student counseling center to try to find a time for a meeting with a therapist, or to have a triage appointment. And they might feel very comfortable with you walking them over there, or helping to facilitate that connection with the student counseling center. I love what you said, that as you learn a little bit more, where you can say, hey, you may not know, but the Dean of Students Office has this whole network of resources and support on campus through a lot of different offices that you might not even know about. I know that they are in a position where they could help you and connect you with those resources. Would it be okay for me to email them and let them know of our conversation, and have someone from their office reach out to you? And then what they will do upon reaching out is they're going to hear a little bit more from you about what's going on, and then they will try to identify the best resource or support, whether on campus or in the community, that they can connect you to, that will be able to provide some assistance to you. How's that sound? And I think having a conversation just like that, showing that you care, showing an empathy, also saying a little bit of what the Dean of Students Office brings to the table. That there is a bit of a misnomer that people think the Office of Dean of Students is where you go when you get in trouble, and that actually is Joanna's office. No, that they would come to our office for any type of support and resources and getting connected with those. So that's what we spend the vast majority of our time doing, is helping students in crisis or of concern and getting them connected to ultimately hope that they are more academically successful, and that we retain them and keep them. That way we don't want to lose a student to withdrawing if we had the opportunity to be able to try to connect them and keep them. So Francesca, I don't know if that helps you of kind of what we do. We really triage. We get students to come in, we spend a little bit of a brief triage moment with them, learning what their challenges are, and then connecting them with one or more resources that ultimately tries to help them.
If I can be brutally honest, a lot of these students' problem is money. Too many hours working, and childcare, sometimes parent care. So would it make sense for me to say, look, maybe this office can help you borrow a little bit of cash or something like that? I don't really know if you do that, but if those resources are available, I'd be happy to.
We actually work with our financial aid office quite regularly to see if there's any scholarships or any loans or grant money the student might be eligible based on their financial dashboard. And we'll refer from our office to financial aid regularly. So I don't think there's anything wrong with referring them directly to financial aid to connect them. The other thing that we have available, which is really smaller monies and more of an emergency financial situation, is we have we have some monies available to us to help students who are in some type of financial crisis. So if whether it's just trying to make ends meet or not knowing where their next food meal is, we have a little bit of money that we have available to be able to help students. But we still have to work with financial aid, even that, because we don't want to negatively impact their financial aid package. So, but we will help students that way. We also have our Red to Black financial literacy program. So maybe their financial challenge is as a lack of not knowing or lack of knowledge or even mismanagement. They can meet with students who are in the financial planning program that will help them kind of look at their day-to-day expenses and budgeting, and help give them some tools to be able to avoid maybe a financial crisis. Great question.
As we are kind of concluding our session here, I just wanted to share something we put together, this team. Thank you again for the presentation. And this is just a quick start guide to kind of summarize some of the main points that we were talking about today, and also some of those resources that may be helpful for you and also for your students. So if there are there any other questions before we sign off today? Thanks
I would
again,
just
everyone.
remember, we are only a call and an email away. If you decide you think of something later, or you did not want to ask in front of everyone, please feel free to reach out to us.
And as we said, if you have a challenging situation, we're happy to consult with you and kind of walk through the fact pattern and try to identify a course of action to help you.
Thanks again, everyone, to to our Dean of Students, to the Office of Student Conduct, Allison Whitney, and everyone on the call. Thank you so much for being here today. Have a great afternoon.